and Brian. So
Yes.
you're on stage, Brian.
Yes, sir. This is Brian Yates with Schwartz, Page and Harding, and welcome everybody to the Woodlands Mud #1 Board of Directors meeting for Tuesday, June the 15th, 2021. As in prior meetings, I'll briefly go through the remote meeting procedures and then perform a roll call. So to begin with, I need to remind everyone the meeting is being recorded as required by the Texas Open Meetings Act. Second, please remember to state your name. But
go in and have her give you a
this
ring.
is Brian. Jim, I think you need to hit mute.
I'll have her
We're
call you
hearing
right in
feedback.
2 minutes. Okay.
This is Brian. Jim, we're getting feedback from
Yeah.
your line. If you could hit mute.
Yeah, so be it. These
This is Brian Shelley. You may need to go try to let Jim know that he needs to mute.
He's on mute.
Okay. Third, we'll continue the practice of having a roll call to vote on each motion. After a motion's been made and seconded, please wait until you hear your name called and then respond with a verbal aye, a nay, or an abstention. Finally, we need to identify each person who's joining the meeting remotely today so that we can accurately reflect the attendance and the minutes of the meeting. I'll perform a roll call for the board members, followed by staff and consultants. When you hear your name or your company called, please respond by indicating that you're present in the meeting. Likewise, if you need to leave the meeting before it adjourns, please announce that you're doing so before you disconnect. Once I've completed the roll call for directors, staff, and consultants, I'll ask for any members of the public to identify themselves for the record. Starting with the roll call for our board of directors, Bob Wallach.
Aye. Present.
Aye.
Walt Leszewski,
present.
Ken Dorland,
Present.
Jeff Long. Is Jeff in the meeting?
Jeff is having trouble connecting via telephone. I expect him to be connecting soon.
Okay. And Hartley McIntosh.
Aye.
Okay, that we do have a quorum of our board present, so we will move on to Woodlands Water staff. Jim Stinson,
Present.
Mike Mooney,
Present.
Maureen Bourgeois,
I'm here.
Shelley Lawson Kennedy,
Present.
Jeannie Scott, I think is in CLEs for the meetings today and tomorrow. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Anyone else from Woodlands Water in the meeting? If not, we'll move on to San Jacinto River Authority staff. Ron Kelly,
Present.
Ed Shackelford,
Present.
Chris Meeks,
Present.
Matt Corley.
Present.
Anyone else from the River Authority in the meeting?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll move on to Mud One consultants. Do we have any Mud One consultants in the meeting this morning? Not, we'll move on to members of the public. Do we have any members of the public present in the meeting? We need to identify you for the record as well.
Dan Coquarts is on the meeting this morning representing Howard Hughes Corporation, the developer.
Okay, anyone else from the public in the meeting today? If not, that will complete the roll call. I'll hand it back over to Bob to begin the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. So if we have no, do we have any comments from the public? Dan, you want to say anything?
No, I'm just here to listen in today. I've got another meeting at 8:30, but I wanted to stop in and say hi to you guys again, and thank you for all the hard work you guys have been doing. If you ever have any questions of the developer, y'all got my number, or call Brian and I can get you any answer you need.
Well, thanks for your attendance. We're always delighted to have you. Okay, moving on to item number 3, the perennial item on Falling Star Court. Mike, any prediction on what year or century will finish this?
No new news. This is Mike. No new news from the Billings. I think they're still waiting on their lien holder to process the paperwork. So we've left a couple of messages and they don't really have anything to say.
Well, frankly, I'm beginning to get a little impatient with them. Is it necessary? Which one is it, 31 or 35 we're having problems with?
This is Mike. It's the Billings. I think the Billings are at 31.
Okay, can we proceed with the 35 or the two are tied together?
So this is Mike. Yeah, the two are tied together. So it would do no good until we got both approvals.
Okay. Okay, thanks for the update. And Mike, while we got you on, any requests for adjustments or relief this month?
This is Mike. Nothing this month. You're clean this month.
Well, sounds good after last month. Okay, the consent agenda. Does anybody have any comments or questions? I just had one question on water service repair. We're about 340% over budget. Mike, you have any feedback on why our expenses are so high in that category compared to our budget?
Yeah, this is Mike. We did have a large repair on Dunlin Meadow next to Marty and Rob Thomas's property at 22 Dunlin Meadow. There's an 8-inch line broke there.
Mm-hmm.
It required us to take out some trees. It was quite expensive. A lot of the other charges are just the locates and line breaks that we investigate for TACUS. You haven't gotten any TACUS bills yet, but you have gotten some of our labor to go out and investigate the leak, locate the lines. It's 10 times what it normally is.
So hopefully we'll get some reimbursement for that, which will offset.
Yeah, the big bills are the TACUS repair bills. We've got like several thousand, even hundred thousands of dollars worth of repairs, not just in Mud One, but throughout the Woodlands that we're hoping to recoup here soon.
So when we get a settlement on those, are they offsets to expenses? Are they considered income? I guess that's a question for Maureen.
Yeah, I would think, this is Mike, I would think it would be an offset to the expense, but Maureen could probably answer that.
Yes, I would deposit it back to the account that it was spent, so it would just net out.
As an offset.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, if there's no other comments or questions on the consent agenda, I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
It's Jeff Long. I'll second.
Any further discussion? If not, Brian, call a question.
This is Brian. If there are no other questions on the consent agenda or discussion on the motion and second, we'll call the vote. Bob, how do you vote?
Aye.
Walt?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Jeff?
Yes.
Hartley?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item 10. Matt, you or Ed gonna take the show?
Sir. Yes, sir. Page 13 of y'all's packet should be the Woodlands Monthly Operations Report for May. I'll highlight the blend ratio between groundwater and surface water fiscal year to date is 49% groundwater to 51% surface water. And there were no permit violations for the month of May. Be happy to answer any questions about the report.
Any questions? Well, thank you for that brief report.
Yes, sir. Thank you all very much.
Number 11, do you want to handle that, or is that Mr. Ed?
That's going to be Chris.
That'll be Chris Meeks. This item's just to see if y'all have any questions on the budget that the Woodlands presented last month. If you do, I'll be glad to take them down, try to answer them if I can. If not, I thank you.
Any questions? Well, moving right along. Jim, you want to talk about the DFC, item number 12?
I'm going to ask Ron to help with that, please. Ron Kelly.
Sure. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for y'all's involvement in so far to date over the last couple of years, and also any comments that have been provided or resolutions provided to Lone Star. They did have their public hearing last week, and there was about a half a dozen, a dozen and a half folks from the Woodlands there. I was very appreciative. Comment period closes on July 19th. And then sometime this fall, it's originally was scheduled for October the 6th. We understand that date is going to move, but GMA 14 will vote on the final DFC, and then we'll go from there. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
I understand the attendance was pretty good at the meeting. Is that correct, Ron?
Yes, sir, it was.
Did you attend the meeting in person or by a Zoom?
In person, and actually the dozen and a half folks of us that were there in the room, we were all in person. There was only 2 people who participated virtually, and that was Mr. John Yours from 36, and then our favorite IOU manager, Mr. Simon Cicada.
Yeah, he's quite a popular attendee. So I've been speaking to the various village associations. I've spoken to 5 of them so far about an active role. And I would sure like to see more public support. I haven't seen the public support that I would like to see taking a stand against what they want to do. So I take it, Ron, they haven't changed their position one iota. They're just going through the show and tell.
There's no indication that Lone Star Board is going to change their mind on anything.
So our only real hope is with GMA. Is that what you're feeling?
Yes, sir.
Anybody else have any further comments? Okay, let's move on to item 13, the MUD 1 and 6 consolidation study. I've had multiple discussions with Neil Gaynor on MUD 6. It is my understanding that they are not going to vote on consolidation this month, but will defer any vote until next month. I did put together a presentation. I may be preaching to the choir here, but I'd like to go over the presentation I prepared about consolidation. So if I can share screen, we'll see what I can do here. So, okay. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the first question that Walt and I on the study committee had, is there a common ground? What are the differences in issues and concern between our 2 MUDs? And in terms of documentation, and now that I think we're complete on the documentation, are we missing anything? The cost benefit, how much is it going to cost? Is it worth it? The physical assets, how do they compare between the 2? And potential maintenance and repair. This seemed to be a concern of MUD 6. And the balance sheets and revenues, how do they compare? And probably one of the most sticky things is the reconstitution of the board of directors. is that itself a deal breaker? And then finally, customer service. Are there any negatives there? Hopefully, those have been answered in the documentation. So the study team provided all the data. I think everyone here should have a copy of that. We looked at the audited statements. They were provided and reviewed, the budget numbers. And again, I'm not aware of anything missing in essential information. We estimate that the one-time costs of $50,000 to $70,000 for legal fees, election costs, and other administrative costs. We've identified $57,000 in direct cash savings per year, and then another $29,000 in indirect cost savings for a total of around almost $87,000 per year. And over 10 years, the present value of the savings is just a little bit shy of $1 million. And significantly, it frees up at least 170 staff hours, as explained in the report. The assets, there are some differences there. Comparing MUD 1 versus MUD 6. MUD 1 has 148,000 feet of water and sewer lines, which is about 25% more than MUD 6. And in sewer, it's strangely the other way around. Also, the size of pipes vary. The drainage ditches, MUD 1 has 7 acres versus 4 in MUD 6. Hydrants, 24% greater in MUD 1. Valves, 14% greater, and manholes are less in MUD 1 than 6. When you adjust these for billings, the number is not so significant, and it's I think we're reasonably comparing apples to apples here. Age and condition, I think it's a little bit difficult to determine that. Both MUDs have a long history of funding maintenance and repair out of revenue and property taxes. And as far as we know, there's no significant deferred maintenance. And Mike or Jim, maybe if you have any comments on that, you can let us know when I'm finished here. And we also recognize that M&R costs can vary significantly from year to year. MUD 6 was concerned that we face some potentially large ditch repair costs in MUD 1. And the only thing we've been able to identify is the enlargement of the culverts on Grogan's Point, Southgate, and Northgate under the county roads. And this is not a MUD 1 responsibility. It is a county responsibility to pay for those enlargements if the work is to be done. It does not mean that MUD 1 cannot contribute to that, but as of right now, it's not an obligation of MUD 1. So I think that allays some of the concerns or fears that they had. The physical assets are, as I noted earlier, are a bit similar, but the composition is slightly different if you look at the balance sheet. The asset book value is not that much difference between the two MUDs. And besides the book value of the assets, other assets, primarily cash and so forth, are identical at about almost 4 million. The liabilities are virtually identical. One big difference is that MUD 1 has completed its AMI expense. Work in MUD 6 has yet to begin, but those expenses our currently budget, and they've prepared for that. Probably the most difficult challenge to consolidation is to going from 10 to 5 board directors. Many people that feel that the status quo is working just fine. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And there is a natural desire of many directors to remain and continue to serve and to get reelected. And some may perceive that there's just too much competition for only 5 seats in the future. And there's always the concern of the us versus them governance on the new board. And I thought, well, one of my thoughts is some of the most senior directors, those of us who have served many, many years, would not run for the new board. That would alleviate some concern. And I have spoken with Neil and say that if we consolidate, I will not run for MUD again in the next election. Other considerations that I think directors need to consider is that we have similar financial attributes. There's no rate or taxpayer incurs an unequal burden in rate or tax differentials due to debt. And the elimination of 5 directors and 1 trustee to govern 24 employees certainly makes a lot of sense in my book. And my personal opinion is that consolidation works, at least as proven by the experience of our MUD together. And a consolidated MUD would still make it only the 3rd largest MUD in terms of revenues. Finally, failure to consolidate provides fodder to justifications for incorporation.
Hello.
And also think that if we do consolidate, it could set off another example for future similar events. So MUD 7 is very close to paying off their debt. I think they will do so this year. MUD 36 is debt-free, but their tax rate, structure, and reserves are quite different. And lastly, I think directors have a responsibility for promoting a most cost-effective governance. As far as customer service and representation, meeting agendas and packets are virtually identical. Few people attend or speak out at MUD meetings, and 99.9% of all customer service is provided by Woodlands Water. And there are no known representation problems among the largest MUDs with properties scattered all over the Woodlands. And finally, as noted earlier, fewer staff hours preparing for and attending meetings frees up more time for service and public relations. So basically, that's my presentation. So so any comments or questions?
Yeah, Director McIntosh, we set a standard when we formed the township of not having to elect all new board members. There was a carryover of some of the board members whose term was not yet up, and remember they didn't do all the township members on the first election. So that might, if we would suggest that the people who are not standing the next election would just carry over automatically, and it would be a 3-2 kind of election. You wouldn't have 5 people; you'd only have 2 or 3 elected. So that's an alternative that you might present to them, because the township had made that as a policy when they formed.
And I think that's a good consideration. So, so for at least a 2-year period, we would have a 7 or an 8-man board, which if I interpret what you suggested correctly, Hartley, I don't know whether there are any legal issues on that, Brian, so that issue would be referred to you. But that's certainly a possibility to, and Brian, do you have any comments off the cuff on that?
This is Brian. Offhand, I don't think there's a provision under the water code that deals with consolidation that would allow for that. I can double check, but I don't think that there is, because we ran through all this stuff in connection with our last consolidation, and I don't believe there was any provision under the water code that would allow for an enlarged board. I think once that district consolidates and you complete your 90-day wrapping up of affairs, then you're consolidated and then governed by the provisions of the water code that relate to district boards and the composition of those boards, which would limit you to the 5 directors.
So we don't
Director
have,
McIntosh, the suggestion was that those people who have 4-year terms who have not expired at the time of the election, they are carried over like they did with the township. The township never exceeded their current number of directors. They just didn't elect the entire amount.
well, with, so what we're suggesting here, if there's a, people's 2-year term expires at the time of consolidation, there would be no election for those positions. So it'd just be those with 4-year terms left, which would either, could be anywhere from 4 to 6, because I don't know how they're staggered between MUD 1 and MUD 6. That's an interesting question.
I'm just looking, it would be 6. You have 6, 3 in MUD 1 that expire in 2024 and 3 directors in MUD 6 that expire in 2024.
Okay, say that again, Jim. So 3 in MUD 6 expire.
Well, in 2024 are two in MUD 1 expire, their terms expire in May of 2022. And 2 directors in MUD 6, their term expires in May of 2022. So that would leave 6 directors eligible under your scenario to serve on the new MUD, the new consolidated MUD.
Yeah, but that does not include those who might not choose to run.
That is correct.
Yeah, this is Brian. I'm pulling up the provision on consolidation because it's been a little while since we've gone through this process with MUD 1 or MUD 2 and MUD 40. So section 54730 says that during a period of 90, subsection B, during a period of 90 days after the day of the election to approve consolidation, the officers of each district shall continue to act jointly as officers of the original districts to settle the affairs of the respective districts. And then C says the consolidation agreement that you have to approve before we go to the election. So the consolidation agreement may provide that the officers of the original districts shall continue to act jointly as officers of the consolidated district until the next general election, or name persons to serve as officers of the consolidated district until the next general election if the officers of the original district agree to resign. So you do have the ability. I think now that I'm thinking through it a little bit more, what we did last time, we may have kept everybody in place for that time period, because it was at a November election that we did the consolidation, and then we had a May director election. We may have kept the directors in place until that next election cycle. So you do have the ability to act jointly as the 2 MUD boards of basically you have 10 board members for a short period of time until the next general election. So if we held a consolidation election in November, there would be the ability to have basically a 10 director board of the newly consolidated MUD until the next MUD director election, which would be in May of 22.
And that is correct, Brian. We did have 10, and then all positions were eliminated.
Yep.
Then the top three of people of the three highest votes got 4-year terms. The people who were elected with the 2 lowest votes got 2-year terms.
This is Brian. That's correct.
I don't think MUD 6 is very enthusiastic about that, but anyhow, I've agreed that if we consolidate, I will not run. So that may eliminate at least one director position. So any further comments or discussions on consolidation?
Bob, I think it's a well prepared report, and I think, yeah, you should make that to them if they're willing, or to see it at least.
So, Brian, I don't see that there's a receive and act in our agenda today. So I take it we could not take a vote today. Is that correct?
This is Brian. That's correct.
Okay, well, it's certainly something we need to put on the agenda for next month, as that's the last possible month before we can put it on the November 3 ballot.
Let me, a question. If there was a desire, could the MUD 1 board actually take action today and ratify it next month? If they wanted to do that?
Well, I would.
This is Brian. I mean, any action that you would take that's not on a posted agenda is voidable. Now, the board if there's not an objection by the other board members, the board president could direct staff to begin negotiation with MUD 6 of a written consolidation agreement, because we would need that written consolidation agreement approved before we would call an election. And Bob is right. The deadline to call a November election is in August. I can't tell you the exact date, but I think it's sometime in early August.
Brian, I don't recall a written consolidation agreement when MUD 2 and MUD 40 merged. Do you have a copy of that somewhere in your archives?
This is Brian. I'll find it.
Okay. Yes, their MUD meeting is tomorrow at 1:30. And if you could send me a copy of that today, I could pass that on to them for their review. And so if both MUDs approve it in July, how long would it take to finalize this agreement between MUD 1 and 6? Do we have to have it finalized before the August 16 deadline for the ballot?
This is Brian. Yes, we would likely, assuming all the stars aligned, we would have both the consolidation agreement and the item to call the November election on your August meeting. I don't know if we have to call a special meeting for August or not. It depends on how the meeting dates fell. It looks like we would have to call one, because the August meeting date based on the calendar appears to be August 17th. And I'd have to pull the election calendar to see what the exact deadline is, if it is the 16th.
And that's correct.
November.
Yeah, the 17th of August for MUD 1 and the 18th of August is the normal dates for those 2 months. And
So we
I'm
would have to
assuming,
call special.
yeah, and so a special could be called in a sense to replace it. So instead of scheduling our meeting on the 17th, we could schedule it the previous week after the trustees meeting to replace it. Could we do that, Brian?
You'll be gone.
This is Brian. You could, or you could call a special meeting just to handle those two items, call the election, and then leave your regular meeting date for other matters. That would be up to the board's discretion and staff.
Yeah, and my wife also reminded me that I will be out of the country that week of August 15. So this introduces some complications. So frankly, I've been a little bit discouraged that it's MUD 6 has been postponing this decision making for so long that we're now in potential jeopardy regarding getting this thing on the November 3rd ballot if we agree to do so. Well, it's something that I will deal with when I talk to Neil, possibly today. So any more discussions or talk on item 13? I guess silence is golden. So Brian, you're up with item 14.
This is Brian. The attorney's report, nothing much of a general nature to report on. The governor did, I think I reported last week at the trustee meeting, the governor did renew his disaster proclamation for another 30-day period. We are working with staff to come up with the process for having districts meet in person in the event that the governor doesn't lift that proclamation in the coming months, but I've got to think that's coming before too long. At our office, for our other MUD clients that meet at our office, we're gearing up to be prepared to host meetings after Labor Day. For the trustees, they did vote to go ahead and hold an in-person meeting for next month. They did also, and Hartley may touch on this on the trustees report, they did vote to recommend that the MUD boards wait one additional month to allow the trustees to meet in person, work through that process, because it's been going on a year and a half since the districts have met, and then consider meeting in person. I think cases are extremely low right now, but to the extent there is much in the way of any risk, there's a little bit of a heightened risk for MUD board meetings, because you do have those meetings back to back, and you have some boards coming in while other boards are coming out, and consultants and whatnot. So I think it's still pretty marginal risk at this point, considering where cases are, but there is that element where that element is not there for the trustees, since they meet on a day where there are no other meetings in the water office. I do understand that there are some questions about how those meetings would be conducted, and questions about possibilities of hybrid meetings, and I did touch on that at the trustee meeting. From a legal perspective, what the governor has done with these proclamations has suspended certain provisions of the Open Meetings Act under 551 125 B that deals with meetings by telephone or remotely. And so what that provisions, he suspended other provisions of the Open Meetings Act as well, but the one that we're focused on is as we go back into a potential open meeting session, and any options for a hybrid meeting, deals with what's been suspended under 551 125. And so what that said was that a meeting held by telephone conference call, and we've also kind of bootstrapped in Zoom because there's dual functionality of telephone or video, may be held only if, and then sub-item 1 is if a emergency of public necessity exists within the meaning of a certain section of the Open Meetings Act. That provision has been suspended. And then there's an and then sub-item 2, convening at one location of a quorum of the governmental body is difficult or impossible. So if you're meeting in person and you actually have a quorum, that it's not difficult or impossible, you're doing it. So in that case, if the governor's proclamation is still in effect, but you have a quorum meeting in person, then you would not be able to avail yourself of the option to call the meeting remotely through the means that we have used over the last close to a year and a half. So you would have, everybody would have to meet in person, or you would only be able to have 2 directors, not a quorum, in person at the water district office. If you had 4, but one person wanted to participate remotely, we could not do that by trying to avail ourselves of the governor's proclamation. In that instance, you would be in a situation where you would have to try to comply with a separate section of the Water Code, or of the Open Meetings Act that we've talked about in the past, that was passed a few sessions back, 551-127 of the Open Meetings Act regarding video conference calls. That's a separate provision that has been in place since 2017, and it does not apply or not apply based on the governor's proclamation. There are just certain requirements in place to be able to hold a meeting by video conference call, and you do have to have a majority of the directors in place. So with as much as we've been using Zoom over the last year plus, staff may be able to review those requirements and conclude that it's possible to conduct meetings in compliance with that separate section of the Open Meetings Act, but that's something that would have to be looked into. So it's a long way of saying it in theory, it is possible to have remote participation, but not by relying on the governor's proclamation. It would have to be under this separate section of the Open Meetings Act that's applicable whether the governor's proclamation is in place or not. Happy to answer any questions on that, but I think at this point we are scheduled to have the trustees meet next month in person. Recommendation is for MUDS to wait one more month to kind of give staff and everyone a little more time to get acclimated to the in-person process and make sure that there's no issues to work through. But at the end of the day, MUD boards are independent governing bodies and do have the discretion to make their own decisions. So that's something at the end of the day will be up to each individual district. So with that, I'll also turn it over to Jim if he has any additional comments, and then be happy to take any questions from the board.
The only other thing that I was we did send out a straw poll, and I would say the majority of the directors are ready to meet in person, but we did have a number that did have reservations, and I think part of the decision to wait and or the recommendation to wait until August was in consideration for those handful of directors that would like a little more time. So that would be the only thing I would add.
We meet via Zoom next month. Okay, any discussion, comments, questions for Brian?
And I think the plan would be, that we would begin meeting in person in August. But if you followed the trustee recommendation, it would be MUDS would meet in person in August.
Okay. Okay, moving on. MCAD. Brian, you want to talk about that, or Jim, is that yours?
Well, I think this one's fairly simple. We had this on each MUD's agenda, but only one MUD is needed to take action to have Arthur Bredehoff, or for you to have a candidate on the MCAD special district election. And Metro Center MUD last night did pass the resolution to have Arthur Bredehoff on the ballot. So unless you would like to have another person on the ballot, there's no action needed today.
Well, I would certainly like to go on record of supporting the resolution to put Arthur on the ballot. I think that would show a sign of support, and I know him personally and cannot think of a better person I would recommend for that. So I would like to make a motion that we support the Metro's MUD's resolution to put Arthur Bredehoff on the ballot.
I'd like to second that.
Any further discussion? If not, Brian, call the vote.
This is Brian. If there's no further discussion on the item, we will call the vote. Bob, how do you vote?
Aye.
Walt,
Aye.
Ken,
Aye.
Jeff,
Yes.
Hartley,
Aye.
motion carries.
Okay, Jim, it's all yours. Item 16.
Okay, thank you, sir. I did report at the trustees that we are still in negotiations with TACUS regarding construction techniques and notification protocols to help reduce the number of damages to the MUD facilities. The numbers are down. Let's hope that that continues. We did also re-invoice. The original invoice for the damages went directly to TACUS. After conferring with TACUS and our outside counsel, we did re-invoice the 5 prime contractors. We identified which prime contractor working for TACUS was responsible for the damage. So we have re-invoiced those 5 prime contractors for damages and have given a deadline of I think next week for payment. We did invoice on the invoice say that we considered the reimbursement past due at this point. And so we will be again working through our attorney to try to collect these damages. And I'll be reporting on that again next month. There's a monthly update from our consortium agreement with HARC in your packet. HARC has also prepared a document recommending areas in Montgomery County to put in additional subsidence monitoring devices. If you remember from their review of the Lone Star Phase 1 subsidence report, that they recommended that additional GPS stations be located in the county and the 1 or 2 extensometers. They have completed their science advisory committee has prepared a detailed report on that. Should be coming out for public this week sometime, but it actually gives specific locations for 2 extensometers and additional GPS sites to monitor subsidence. We're still working through potential relocations of a couple of AMI poles where residents have expressed a concern. Again, let me emphasize, I'm not recommending that we relocate them. I'm just going to prepare the data for the trustees and the board directors to look at should you choose to do so. And there's been a request that our staff and additionally SJR8 staff try to be prepared as best we can to secure funding from the Biden infrastructure plan if and when that gets approved. So we are preparing a short list of lobbyists and consultants to work with us on that, and are working to set up a meeting with Kevin Brady's office to get his feedback on how to best accomplish that goal. And that concludes my report, and I'm available for questions.
Any questions?
You know, Jim, I just find it strange that we're having to sue a subcontractor for a main contractor. I just have never seen that before. I always thought that the main contractor was a responsible party, since he's the one that has the contractual agreement with his subcontractor.
It's a quirk in the government code regarding these communication contractors. They seem to think they have some immunity in damages. Look, we're following legal direction. You know, we initially sent the invoice to TACUS. After negotiations, we did agree to re-invoice with our attorney's support. I'm not saying a suit is necessary at this point. We'll see what happens in the next week or so. But we're prepared to take whatever legal action is needed to recover those expenses.
You know, Jeff, you might add, I mean, have you seen that before?
Walt, I agree with you. I've never seen that. I would think that at least the general contractor, the main contractor should be party to the suit because they sign a contract with the sub. The sub does not sign a contract with whoever the original entity is. Sometimes the original entity, city, county, doesn't even know who the sub is. So this is an odd provision in there. That's fine, but I would think the main contractor would be party to the suit. But anyway, I agree with you, Walt. I haven't seen that.
Never seen it before. I've never seen that before.
And I would probably guess if we have to sue, we will sue all of them.
And anybody else walking by.
Right.
Hey, Jim, on that, moving that tower, did you ever get any resolution from the DSC or anything, or any comments from them on that?
On relocating the towers from where they are now
Yes.
onto potential park sites, it's still being vetted. We've identified multiple locations in each of the parks, but they are being vetted more thoroughly with park staff this week. But I think, you know, should we decide to put it there, I think there's no DSC approval on that on these type of antennas on park property or SJRA property.
Well, I guess probably the point I was trying to make is I don't think there's any violation there. Just because someone can see an object out there doesn't mean it's in violation. As I mentioned before, it's no different than when the towers went up in town center for Anadarko there. I mean, you can see them all over Grogan's Mill. That doesn't mean that that's a violation there.
Yeah, no, and if I think a decision is made to move them, it's simply as a courtesy to the homeowners that are objecting.
And inexpensive.
That's right.
I don't, actually, like I'm saying, I don't see where the residents ought to have to pay for that. You know, I'd paint the pole before I sure would move it.
And that's absolutely going to be part of the options that I present at some point.
And if anybody else has any comments on it, I mean, I just don't see where that's a violation or whether it should be an expense that the MUDs ought to absorb.
Understood, and I'll just emphasize again that the towers can remain where they are with no violation occurring. If they're moved, it would just be a courtesy.
Any further comments, questions? If not, we'll move on to item 17. Hartley?
Well, it pretty well covers in pages 27 through 29, but I would point out that the proclamation was passed recommending that we recognize the outstanding work of the Woodlands staff, water agency staff during the COVID-19 problems, the ice storm of February 21. And along with that, the general manager was authorized a monetary bonus to be distributed among his personnel. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Hartley. Moving on to item 18. Certainly the most important thing we need to put on our agenda next month is a vote on consolidation. Do you have any further items that anybody would like to place on next month's agenda? If not, we'll move ahead to item 19 and adjourn the meeting. So everybody have a good month and we'll see you all next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.